All right, please be seated. Well, welcome everybody to another exciting episode of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Teachers Certification course. Great to see everybody here, and for those of you online, we're very thankful to have you here also. Okay. Anyway, so we are in the acceptance unit. There's a picture of it right there. You can go the Peaceful Solution, official Peaceful Solution, and you can actually download a copy for yourself if you don't actually have the book. And in the acceptance unit, we are beginning on page 140 tonight, 140. Page 140. So this is entitled To Do or Not to Do. And it's about choices. This whole section is about choices that we make. Throughout this particular chapter, we've been talking about choices. We've been talking about self-control. We've been talking about some of the highlights are the need that how we need to have acceptance, with our peers, how we look towards that and desire it and need it, and how influences affect us, and also what I consider one of the main things that you really need before all of this even comes to mind, to where you're looking to do something differently in your life, is you've got to realize that all life has meaning, and that everybody has a purpose in their life. And once you realize that you do have a purpose, that this isn't just all willy-nilly, just eat and sleep and rise up and go play and all, once you realize that there's more to it than that, that's when it seems that most people that I've met that have started learning the Peaceful Solution, that seems to be the time where it really enters their mind that, look, I got to do something different. I want to improve my life. I want to improve my life for my family and others around, and stop being the idiot that I've been all my life. That's really how it seems to take place. So we're not going to go back and review where we've been so far. We did quite a bit of that last week, and in going back during this particular lesson, we will cover a little bit of that already too. So let's go ahead and start. Before we do that, let's turn to page lesson plan 7D, and let's look at the procedure. Procedure number 6 on lesson plan 7, page D. It says, have students read the section entitled To Do or Not to Do, and I'm going to help you with that tonight. We're going to read that on pages 140 through 143 in their handbooks. Again, if you don't have one of the books, you can download it online. Stress that knowing why these behaviors are risky will help them to resist influences that encourage, sexual behaviors, taking drugs and alcohol, and engaging in criminal activities. So we're going to be talking about quite a bit of this tonight, and how things, what leads to these things. So to do or not to do, it's your choice. So we all have a choice. No one's going to make us, or no one can make us do something that we really don't want to do. They can make us desire that we would have done it. They can threaten and even go through with physical harm or violence of some type, and some type of sanctions or whatever it might be, economically or otherwise. And so, but it's our choice. You can't say someone made you do it. It's our choice to do it or not. So there are literally thousands of young men and women who have ruined their health in just one night. And think about it. All it takes is one night. And we're talking about a lot of different types of conduct here, not just one. They acted impulsively, gave in to their emotions, and made a poor choice and got an STD. Now, we've already talked about emotions somewhat, in that we don't want to make decisions based upon emotions. You can't rely on your emotions. Emotions are great to have because if we didn't have them, life would be rather boring, you know. Different personalities, different emotions and the way they affect people. It's all part of life. But if you're making your decisions based upon emotions, you're almost always going to get it wrong. You're going to have a hard road ahead of you, and it's going to be a roller coaster of a life. And that's where a lot of drama comes from in people's lives. Possibly you've known somebody like that it seems like their life is just full of drama and it never goes away. And you're like, man, why do they got so much drama in their life? It's much better to have a peaceful life. That's what we ought to be looking towards doing. So they acted impulsively, gave in to their emotions, made a poor choice, and got an STD. They are now dying a slow, agonizing death. This way of life is not for you. Now, we talked about this because we read this paragraph last week. We talked about that slow, agonizing death. So even though you might think you're not dying a slow, agonizing death, if you have an STD, which nowadays most everybody does have some form of STD, whether they know about it or not, but you're dying a slow, agonizing death. Where you might have lived to be very, very old, if you die at, 90 years old or so, and you think you've lived a long, full life, you could have lived longer, if you weren't dying that slow, agonizing death. The agonizing and slow part is all the diseases you get along the way, and all the surgeries and the medications and everything that you've got to take. And of course, we've all, you can look at me, I'm not, real young, I guess, according to some. And a lot of people my age really go through a lot of pain and agony in hospitals and nursing homes and with medications and so forth. And it's just, it's what it says. It's a slow, agonizing death. It takes your life. It takes your money. It takes your time. And then you die, and then your family is left with you not being there. Well, many young people are faced with making decisions whether or not to have these premarital relations, taking drugs, abusing alcohol, or possibly even becoming involved in some form of criminal activity. And these are all what we call, risky business, because it is risky business. It might not seem that way at the time, or you might look back and say, well, I used to do this, and hey, it ain't never done nothing to me. Well, you're wrong. It has. So this risky behavior, here are some logical reasons why you must avoid these behaviors. And we're going to talk about these things. There's 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and we're going to talk extensively about these things. And one thing I did want to mention, I think I did the last class, but these things that we do, to get these STDs, and when we get involved in drugs or alcohol abuse or some form of criminal activity, these things stay with us for life. I mean, right now, if I knew something about your life up to this point, and I just said the right word that triggered your subconscious mind to pull up the entire video of something that you did when you were 14 years old, or 20 years old, or 25 years old, whatever. It'll pull up and run like a movie. You've ever had that experience? Have you? I have. And everybody has. It's just like if I said the right word, or if you smelled the right smell, or you saw something that made you think about this, or you heard a song, and it brought all this stuff back to you, and it was just vivid and in every aspect. You could even see who was with you at the time and so forth. Remember what song was playing. Remember some of the things that are being said. If you think about it really long, you can probably see what was sitting on the nearby table, or the color of the couch, or whatever, the color of the car, or what kind of car it was. I mean, you could come up with all that stuff. It's there. I mean, so you have to be careful what you put into your mind. So I really encourage, especially you younger men out there, to keep that in mind as you grow. To be careful what you put in your mind. It might seem harmless at this time, and everybody might be doing it, but you've really got to be careful about this because it doesn't leave you. It's there forever. I can tell you. I'm a little bit older than you, and I can tell you that those things stay in your mind. You know, in the character unit on page 2, we talked about a road less traveled last week. And so just to reiterate a little bit, on page 2 of the character unit, you can download that also, by the way. It starts out and says, here's what it all boils down to. You don't have to go this route. You can take a road less traveled. Now, we're not going to go into all of this, but it's not the most popular road that your friends or people you call your friends are taking. But another fact is life is about making choices. And the choices you make, the ones that could save your life, will be based on your development of a positive character. All right? And the only way to develop that positive character is to start now and to have the right replacement, the right thing, the right definition and description and guidance of what true positive moral character is. And we have that in the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. It's been proven to work time and time and time again. And I'm looking at the people that it's worked on right now. Okay, so we're talking about these choices. Let's look at number 1 there on page 140. Now, this is talking to the girls. Don't feel pressured to have these intimate relations because your friends are, or because the boy you like says, if you love me, you'll do this. Don't fall for that. That's all a bunch of hooey. Don't fall for this type of negative influence. That's what it is, a negative influence. And remember, we have to watch the influences that are coming our way and decide if they're positive or negative, and then make the right choice. So engaging in these behaviors puts you at risk for these STDs. This includes HIV, the virus that causes AIDS. You're also at risk for pregnancy. Babies born to teenage mothers suffer greater health risks and are at more risk of being abused. Now, one thing about that, babies born to teenage mothers. I've got something here that I'd like to show you. Can you see this? This is the United States map of counties depicting teen birth rates per country by quintile. Now, what I'd like you to look at is the general area where you might be from, where you lived at, where you live now, and so forth. I mean, I can look over here and see where I was initially from, where I was born. I can look at where I lived later in life and where I live now. I can look at all of these things, and I can see the teen birth rates. Now, if you see the dark red, it's 48.2 to 119 births per 1,000 females aged 15 through 19. So this is not even 20 years old, okay? If it's the orange that you see, which is in some less populated areas, it'll be 37.5 to 48 teen births. That's 15 to 19 years of age. We're not discussing those that are younger nor those that are older. And then the yellow is the next step down, and then the light blue, and then the dark blue. And you'll notice some areas of dark blue. Now, I've got to tell you that this is reported. You've got to always remember we are talking about reported teen births. And when we're talking about the rest of the things we'll talk about tonight, we're talking about reported things. There is a vast difference between what's reported and what is shown in any kind of statistics, I can tell you. So looking at that and thinking about that chart right there, I can tell you, it reminds me of the trips that we made to Central High in Little Rock, Arkansas. Now, Central High has some notoriety of being where the governor of the state was not going to allow segregation at that time, back in the late 50s, and then the president of the United States got involved and sent the National Guard. He actually sent a branch or a wing of the Air Force, if you will, but he federalized the National Guard, that the governor had used the National Guard to keep black students out, and he federalized the National Guard and had them to guard the black students as they went to class. So it was a very interesting time in history. The governor actually ended up shutting the school down. It was shut down for a while. And it was a hard time in people's lives, and it was a very, very shameful time in the history of Arkansas and people in general, and the way they could treat each other. But the reason I'm bringing up Central High is that this is a international university. People come from all over the world to go to school there now. And it has the notoriety of being a high school, which is also a national park. That's very interesting. So in this school that is so well known, the teenage mothers there, for many years now, they've had a nursery there because there's so many teen births. So they started this nursery to allow the mothers to bring their children, the teen mothers to bring their children and continue going to school, because it's so prevalent there. I don't have the exact numbers now of what it is here in 2021, but it was a very large number that they had of children there that were actually participating in a pre-K program at the school. So that was kind of an interesting little fact there. And part of the problem that leads to these things taking place is, what we talked about a minute ago, those high points that we've been talking about in this whole unit. The life has meaning. You have a purpose in life. The influences, negative or positive. Peers, the need for acceptance from your peers, and then self-control, the absence of it or having self-control, and you make your choices. And another thing that is part of that is your values. In the character unit on page 6, character unit page 6, you can write that down and check it out later if you don't have a book or haven't downloaded it, but page 6 is values. And values are what you believe in or feel strongly about. So what's a value? What you believe in and feel strongly about. Some people believe in and feel strongly about being a Democrat or Republican. Some people believe in and feel strongly about what they call women's productive rights, or abortion, if you will. And some feel strongly, on both sides of that issue. But these values, they also play a key role in developing your character. Developing your character. The sum total of everything you value becomes your value system. So you have a value system. And your value system has great importance upon the things that you choose to do. As you mature and grow, your parents share their values, their parents share their values with them, and the things they care about and consider as important are the same things you care about and consider important, until some things start changing in your life, possibly. I know, a lot of people, when they talk about what religion they are, they talk about, well, I'm this religion because my mama and daddy were this religion, and my grandma and my granddaddy was this religion. Or I'm Democrat because my mom and daddy was Democrat. And you could go on and on and on. I drive Chevrolet because my mom and daddy drive Chevrolet. We've had Chevrolet all our life, or Ford or whatever, the big three, who knows. So when you interact with people, even other than your parents, you're going to adopt their values as well. When you hang out with them, your friends, your peers, when you hang out with them, you're going to be adopting their values and they'll be adopting yours. There's going to be a transfer, some sharing taking place, and it's not always going to be so great. That's why you have to have a set of values that you feel strongly about, that you can hold on to in the face of adversity, when the negative influences come your way, so you can make right choices. You get this stuff from everywhere. So you can read that later. I don't mean to go too far into that. We're going to switch back over here to page 140 again in the acceptance unit. But these behaviors could also earn you a reputation of being easy. Once this type of reputation is earned, it's extremely difficult to be seen as anything else. And that's something that's a true statement right there. It will get you that reputation. Let's move on to the boys. If your buddies are telling you that you gotta have these type of relations to be a man, then you should ask yourself if they're really your buddies. Remember the peer pressure, the friends, the peer pressure. Remember that, okay? And if a girl is pressuring you to do these things, you should ask yourself if it's worth the price you could end up paying. You might think you're ready to have a family, but you're not ready at that age. At a young age, you are not ready. That's just all there is to it. Even as an adult, it takes a long time before your mind is working right. I can tell you that. So you're putting yourself at risk for sexually transmitted diseases such as AIDS, and don't let yourself be influenced into doing something you're going to regret. If you get someone pregnant, you are just as responsible. I wanted to, let's see. Let me find this. Okay. I think I left that one behind, but I would like to show you one of the things that comes from this type of conduct. See if I can increase that just a little. Yep. If you can read that, it says the abortion rate among U.S. women aged 15 to 19. Remember, we were talking about the teen births a moment ago. Now, those are the reported teen births. And here's the abortions among that same age group. And these are the reported abortions, okay? There's many, many more that were never reported. And in this particular instance, it shows which state has the most of these abortions in this age group. And you can see the District of Columbia actually has the majority of them. 19.8% of the teens in that state from 15 to 19, we're talking about 20%, 1/5, have had abortions in that state. You can go on down the list. New York is right there, 16.2. New Jersey, Maryland. Now, in California, I would have thought it would have been a little bit higher, but Connecticut, Florida, Nevada, it goes on down the line. And you can see that these states that have some of the highest abortion rates are also some of the states that have the most, and I'm going to use the word liberal. I'm not using it to describe Democrat or Republican or anything like that, but more liberal views of sex education and so forth in school, and the ability to have clinics in the schools that basically do not teach against the relations that bring this forth, but more so what they do is leave it to the child to decide for themselves based upon whatever information they've gathered from friends, from TV, from radio, and any other place that they might have gotten this information. So let's move on to number 3 here. Now, number 3. Alcohol and drugs are affecting children at an earlier age. Addiction to these mind-altering substances can affect you for life. If anybody tells you that you won't get addicted by trying drugs just once, tell them they're wrong and walk away. The fact is, just one time can even kill you. And if you've watched the news, you've seen reports of where somebody, went to a party and, of course, they ended up dead, whether by getting shot or something or whether by an overdose and so forth. But the fact is, one time can even kill you. And what I'm going to show you, it's kind of a horrid picture, but this isn't just one time here, but it is actually over a period of time. But you can see right here where at age 23, this young man started out. He looked like this, he doesn't have all the scars on his face and so forth. Maybe you can get a better look there. Looks like fairly normal person. Age 25, a couple years later, he's looking like this. He's got some sores around his mouth and everything, and you're starting to see some puffiness and him walking around with his mouth all, swollen up and kind of open all the time. And then by the time he hit later on at age 25, we can see, quite a difference in his total look there, and in the way his eyes look also, that crazed look in his eye. Can you see that? And different deformities and skin, the skin itself, then the facial musculature and fat, so his face is changing. Then the teeth and gums, that's a big deal. The teeth and gums start rotting out. And then also they start looking much older than they actually are. Now, there were many pictures I could have downloaded and showed you today, but I didn't want to gross you out too bad. You might be going to eat dinner later on. But at the same time, I hope it does gross you out enough where you never want to be a part of that. And for those of you who have been a part of it or are a part of it now, you can change your life. Those things reverse too. And I can tell you that I've known people in the past that got so strung out on crystal meth, they looked a lot like that. Their features changed in just, a matter of months or a couple years. But I can tell you too that the ones that I know that turned their life around, they lost all that and they went back to having a fairly normal look, except their teeth and gums, I think, still gave them quite a few problems. Another statistic here I'd like to show you. This is okay. This is alcohol. 58.5% of 12th graders tried alcohol, and this is a national survey that was taken. I remember even when I was in school, I remember that they would hand out surveys and ask, if we'd ever tried marijuana or if we ever drank and so forth and so on. And then 6% of the students drove after drinking. This is high school age. 16% rode in the car of someone who had been drinking. I think everybody in here probably knows somebody that as a teen or young adult got in a car with somebody and ended up dead, after they got in a car with somebody who was drinking. Then we can look at the marijuana. 16% of 12th graders have used marijuana in the past month. This is nationwide. 10% of high schoolers earning A's currently use marijuana, while 48% earn D's or F's. And then we go to the prescription drugs and opioids, which have they've really taken off. I mean, I'll show you a chart here in a minute that shows how much this has really taken off. But up to 10% of students misuse all types of amphetamines, and 7% of high school seniors report misusing Adderall. This is just giving you a little bit of history, and where you can see over the years this has increased quite a bit due to the availability of, or also to I would say the media has a vast presence in this, because the media really, at my age, I remember songs that really glorified this type of behavior. But nowadays, oh man, it is off the charts, so to speak. They're on the charts, but it's off the charts. Okay, let's look at another one. Now, the drug use among youth. I'm going to zoom in a little bit on that first part. Drug use amongst 8th graders, all right, increased 61% between 2016 and 2020. By the 12th grade, 62% of teenagers have abused alcohol. 50%, that's half, have misused a drug at least one time. And this is the National Center for Drug Abuse Statistics. 43% of college students use, notice it says use, illicit drugs on a continual basis. 43% of college students. And then they're getting slammed with all the media and Hollywood and the teachings that are coming forth from some socialist teachers and so forth. But 86% of teenagers know someone who smokes, drinks, or uses drugs during the school day. And now, look at this. Overdose deaths among 15 to 24-year-olds. Look at that chart. It starts right here in 1999, and it goes up here to 2019. Look at that, would you? These are overdose deaths. Now, the top line is total overdose deaths, and these are teenagers who, went out and thought they were going to have a great time tonight. And then the next line, and this is why I mentioned the opioids, look at how high that brought that up. See, you look down here at the cocaine and even the heroin, which, that was always talked about. You could die in one day. Just people have had heart failure their first time ever using cocaine. People have died of overdose first time ever using heroin. And we've all probably heard stories about these things taking place. But look at what the opioids do. This is the opioids, the second line from the top. It brought that total number of overdoses up extremely high. Okay? Because they're so available. They're so available in this day and time. More so than it was when I was a child. And then one last chart here. I thought this one was fairly interesting. Or one last statistic. It's talking about the adolescent drug use in the U.S. And in 1991, approximately 30.4% of those in school grades 8, 10, and 12 had used illicit drugs at some point. That's a big percentage for back then. This number reached a high of 43.3% in 1997, but then it says it dropped back down in 2019. Now, if you think about how things have progressed with the legalization of marijuana and how people's attitudes have kind of slacked off about the whole thing, and you go back and remember that we are talking about reported statistics, you can bet that the attitude about marijuana slacked off so much during this last time that most of it probably did not even get reported. I mean, really. So you see that particular statistic falling, but in reality, I bet it did not, especially considering all the deaths. Now look at this. Percentage of 12th graders who perceived LSD as fairly easy to obtain in 2019, 28.7. So these are 12th graders, and they perceive that LSD is very easy to come by. That's over 25%, getting close to 30%. And I mean, back in the day, I think if you were even looking for LSD, it wasn't that easy to come by, but now it's supposedly very easy. So we have a lot of factors contributing to these teen deaths and the addictions and this way of life and the bad choices that come. I'll tell you, if you're abusing alcohol, if you're getting drunk, going to parties, abusing alcohol, abusing drugs, I don't care, marijuana, cocaine, opioids, whatever, ecstasy, LSD, any of those things, you are most likely going to be involved in situations where you could come up with an STD very easy. Because your defenses are falling. Your defenses are very low when you're dealing with these things, alcohol and drugs. Your defenses are quite lower. So going back to what will help keep you from getting involved in these things, that clock is moving pretty fast. Going back to some of the things that will help you avoid this particular behavior is, again, I mentioned it once again, the high points of what we've covered in not only this chapter but in the entire book is you have to figure out that life has meaning and that you have a purpose in life, okay? Then you start figuring out, look, I need to make sure that what I'm doing is the right thing. Then guarding yourself against the negative influences. Stick with people who have positive influences coming your way. And your peers, the need for acceptance from your peers. Find friends that are positive instead of negative and not participating in this type of behavior. Stop, think, and ask. Use some self-control. Make the right choices. To make the right choices, you've got to have all this other stuff lined up. You have to have a value system that's positive. If your values consist of, wanting to be the most popular person around, you're probably going to fall into some of this behavior. You're not going to practice self-control as you need to do. We tend to give in if we don't have a strong value system. I often wondered how people could be involved in gangs and do a random shooting going down the street to be able to, and this is one of the things that occurred quite often in Little Rock, is the initiation ceremonies to join a gang involved randomly beating someone up, just the first stranger that someone said, okay, it's them, go get them, or shoot that person. Whatever the initiation was, I often wondered, how could they do that? It's because they didn't have values. They didn't value human life. They didn't value and respect other human beings. And in my own life, I could look back and say my values were not what I would have wanted them to be when considering my own life and my own goals and so forth by getting involved in any of this behavior, which many of us here could say, I'm sure. We can't go back and change it at this point, but we can now start and move on in our lives, no matter how old you are, even if you're my age, or older. So, just to give you a couple statistics here real quick, we're not going to spend too much time on it, but 70% of 18-year-old and under in the last month in one particular state said they had been to drinking parties. Nationally, 4 million teenagers in the last month from when the statistic was taken, 4 million teenagers in the last month admitted to binge drinking. And a large percentage of those, almost 1 million, admitted to doing it 3 or 4 times in the month. Now, those of you that know what binge drinking is, it's getting on that binge and continuing, not nonstop. That's actually an amazing figure to me. Okay, well, let's move on. Something else that's coming out right now, I just wanted to mention this. For a long time, psilocybin mushrooms, they call them magic mushrooms and so forth, have been used to what people describe exit your body, to bring you so close to death that you have an experience that supposedly changes your life to some degree. Nowadays, they're actually coming back and using that and making it legal in many areas to be used by people who are suffering depression or really just anybody who wants to use it. There's some areas in the United States right now that they have no criminal laws affecting any use of any of these items, including heroin, mushrooms, cocaine, LSD. No laws at all keeping you from using them. You can use them at will. Another thing that's being touted right now is toad venom. Anybody heard of that? So the toad venom, smoking toad venom. Now, who ever thought of something like that? I mean, whoever thought of that surely doesn't need to be trusted. But so people are saying, in fact, very popular people and celebrities and sports stars and so forth are touting toad venom as being the thing that changed their life and taught them that all life has meaning, you know. Well, it doesn't come like that, y'all. It really doesn't. I don't know what it's going to do. That's fairly new to me, hearing about that. I don't know what it's going to do to them in their life, but it's not what they believe it to be. I think they're going to find out. All right, let's move on to number 4. Now, on page 141, don't be influenced to break the law. Now, I can tell you right now, if you're involved in some of these activities, you're automatically breaking the law. But going beyond that, these activities that we talked about just in the last 3 sections there can lead you to, again, lowering your defenses, and can lead you to being involved in shoplifting, trespassing, vandalism, and getting involved in any illegal activity can lead to detrimental results. Now, this is a choice that could have serious legal consequences also. Excuse me. Legal consequences mean police, court, community service, or detention centers. Please don't think it can't occur to you or that you won't get caught. Prisons are full of people who thought they were not going to get caught or didn't care if they got caught or not. Juvenile detention centers are filled with young people who thought it couldn't occur to them. An illegal choice not only affects you, but it will also affect the person who has been victimized. Innocent people and their properties suffer because of crime. And then it has an article we're fixing to read. And then I've got something to show you. Let's do the article first. So here's one victim's tale. Once I was in a fast food restaurant at a train station buying a burger. For a split second, I stupidly left my wallet on the counter as I turned around to get some, notice it says catsup or ketchup. It's kind of spelled both ways. Needless to say, my wallet was gone by the time I turned back. Now, had the thief thought about me? Did he stop for a second to wonder how I'd feel or how I'd get home? No, because he was simply thinking about what he wanted and how to get it without getting caught. This is out of a book called Raising a Thinking Preteen by Marina B. Shure, Ph.D. So this particular thing, this person that stole the wallet was only thinking about what they wanted. They had no thought of any compassion or care or concern about the other person that was stolen from. And so that you can see there that their value system did not include not stealing from others, And it's funny about people's value systems because, I've heard people described as having a great character, but at the same time, they didn't mind trespassing. I've heard other people described as having a great character, and when you got to know them a little bit more and got to know their life history, they didn't mind murdering somebody. Now, people can change, and they can turn from that, but I'm talking about people who had not practiced improving their character through, like, the peaceful solution, for instance. I've heard of people described as having a great character that did not mind doing drugs or being involved in other violent situations that hurt other people, including themselves. So I think the definition, what we find and what we found in many schools too, in asking students and teachers alike, what is character? What you find is that nobody knows. Not too many. There's a few that have an idea about it, but not many really know. And they confuse personality and character quite a bit. So this is one of the things that you as a teacher of the Peaceful Solution, you've got to help define that line of what personality and what character really is. And you have all the helps. We have the books. It starts out with the character unit and on through the different units to help your student get there. And you've got to get there too as a teacher. You've got to know what you're talking about so you can get this across so that your students choose the right way and decide not to get involved in these behaviors that we're talking about. Down at the bottom of the page, there's a quote from the Peaceful Solution. It says, "Stop, think, and make the right choice. The choice you make today can affect you for the rest of your life and will affect you for the rest of your life. In some way, in some form, it will affect you and others the rest of your life." You know, there's a ripple effect even that takes place. With every action that you take, there's a ripple effect that you might not even see where it ended up at. And it goes way beyond you and whoever's standing next to you at the time. No matter what it is, whether it be positive or whether it be negative. Let's go ahead and turn on over to page 142. And I'm going to show you, though, before we get started on that, I want to show you one of the things that we talked about a moment ago about reported and not reported items or crimes and teen births and everything else. So in this case, what this is talking about is crime. From 1994 to 2010, the percentage of serious violent crime, rape or sexual assault, robbery, aggravated assault, that was not reported to police declined from 50% to 42%. My question would be, if it wasn't reported to somebody, how do we get this report of the statistics, that it went down? It says, once again, the percentage of serious violent crimes that was not reported to police declined from 50% to 42%. The percentage of unreported violent crime victimizations that were not reported because the victim believed the police would not or could not do anything doubled from 10% in 94 to 20% in 2010. From 2006 to 2010, the highest percentages of unreported crime were among household theft, 67%, and rape or sexual assault, 65%. Victimizations, while the lowest percentage was among motor vehicle theft. About 3 in 10, 31% of the victimizations involving a weapon and an injury to the victim went unreported to police between 2006 and 2010. Anyway, you get the idea. There's a lot of things that are unreported out there, and I don't quite know how they would know that the unreported went down or quite where the statistics come from, other than there being surveys and people saying, yeah, this occurred to me, but, I didn't go to the police or anything. So this might explain it just a little bit more. Okay, this is, again, from the U.S. Department of Justice. So it was a survey. Victimizations not reported to police. It says fear of reprisal, of getting the offender in trouble. Now, this is the reasons they didn't report to police. 13 of those surveyed, or the percent, said that is why, the fear of reprisal. 16% said, the police aren't going to do anything anyway. Not important enough to report was 18%. And other reasons, just for whatever reason, was 18%. And then a whopping 34% dealt with the matter in another way, whether it be on their own, retaliation or whatever, or something of that nature. So, and the reason I brought that up is because I had the sheet I wanted to show you. I don't quite have it here, but it was talking about the decline in violent crime over the past couple years. Well, it hasn't declined. There's a bunch of it that's not reported. And you can see on the news that it definitely has not declined. I mean, look at the riots and everything taking place. Is that a decline? It's unbelievable the things that are taking place. Stores being broken into, people losing their life, beatings, entire neighborhoods burned to the ground. It's just unbelievable. Okay, let's go ahead to page 142. And the title of that page is Get the Facts. Now, HIV causes AIDS, which stands for Acquired Immune Deficiency Syndrome, AIDS is practically common among young people. 1/5 of all the people in the United States who have AIDS are in their 20s. 1/5. Now, from all the statistics I've seen, the higher age teens and on into the 20s are some of the most active in this behavior that would allow them to contract HIV and AIDS. These people were most likely infected with HIV in their teens. The ones that are in their 20s were infected in their teens. So you teens, don't think you're getting by with anything. It doesn't even show up till later. AIDS has no cure, and most people eventually die. Of course, you see all the pharmaceutical ads on TV these days showing people laughing and jumping and playing around, having a great time because they now take their meds to control their AIDS. And that's not reality. You know, back when AIDS first started becoming known, and I almost printed a picture of it for you because it was one of the most horrid things I had seen. Some people might remember the movie star Rock Hudson back in the 60s and so forth, the early 70s, and back then he was always a manly man and, always got the girl and rode off into the sunset and all that type thing, and very popular. And the last thing I saw and heard from him was that his lifestyle left him with a new disease that nobody had known much about prior to this time that was called AIDS. And it showed him laying in a hospital bed in the last days of his life, and he looked like a skeleton. You couldn't even recognize the man. And so that was the thing that one of the things that brought it to the attention of the public. But moving on, STDs are sexually transmitted diseases. An STD can be acquired by having these relations just once with someone who is infected. About 3 million teens acquire an STD each year. It's probably much higher than that. Again, these are reported figures. These diseases can cause problems for the rest of a person's life. These statistics I just read in the book are a little bit old. Some of we just gave you some of the other statistics here, and it's quite higher than that. Many things influence this activity among the teens. Peers can pressure teens into early sexual activity. Some youth engage in this because they fear rejection if they don't do it, and others might even fear physical or sexual violence if they refuse. Now, let me turn over here for a minute. On page 70. On page 70, it's talking about, and this is the fear of rejection and everything. It's talking about your peers. Page 70 in the character unit is peer power. And just briefly, as you get older, you rely on your friends for more for companionship and acceptance. And it's nice to be around others who are fun and share similar interests and personality traits as you. Having friends is great, but friends can also influence each other in negative ways. And this is what we're talking about too. This is a huge one when it comes to this behavior that we've been looking at on the past couple pages. It's peer pressure. It's huge. And not only talking about your peers, excuse me, but also talking about the influences that come from the music you listen to, video games that are played, movies, TV shows. It's rampant. It's rampant right now. Teenagers today and young people have more negative influences coming at them than I could have ever imagined when I was a teen. It's just unbelievable. And I really thought that when I look back, I thought, wow, we had a bunch of negatives coming our way, But it's just unbelievable what's out there right now. And as an adult, I can see those things, and the little bit I've heard and seen, I'm like, man, that's just, I don't know how teens have got to really have a strong set of values. They have to have a strong value system. They have to be able to practice self-control. They have to know that they have a purpose in life to avoid all these negatives and not make these bad choices. It's just out of control. And page 67 in your character unit kind of talks about that too. You could go back and read it, but the music is talked about on this page. It starts out and says do, re, mi. Let's talk about music. Can it influence your character? Absolutely, yes. And it goes on to say from that music is an important part of life and has been influencing people for thousands of years. And music has the ability to affect our emotions, and emotions affect the way we act. Remember, don't make your decisions based upon emotion. You're going to get it wrong if you do. And so, you know, music has been used to help young children learn. I bet just about everybody in this room and online has learned to sing their ABCs. Am I right? That's how you learned your ABCs, by learning to sing it, because it stuck in your mind. And that's what music does. It sticks in your mind. You can go back right now. I don't want to put it in your head, but you can hear 2 or 3 notes of a song and you can recognize it like that from 30, 40, 50 years ago. How do I know? Because I can recognize that 50 years ago very easily. So it's very important to guard what you put into your mind, and especially that music. Man, it's really a challenge these days. We're going to go ahead and end right there. Let me go back to where we were at. We were halfway down page 142 there. I could go ahead and finish reading these. 55% of teens believe an unplanned pregnancy was a result of this behavior while drinking or on drugs, and they might not even remember doing that. And each year, 40,000 girls drop out of school because they become pregnant. This is what comes from this. This is the kind of stuff that comes from this, and then they try to put a Band-Aid on it and try to handle the consequences by having nurseries and schools and so forth, so a person can live a normal life, they say. It's not the answer. The answer is to not do it in the first place. I'd like to thank everybody for coming tonight and being with us online. And on 1/5/2022, we will have class at 5:30 in the evening, and I hope everybody can attend. We'll be starting on page 143, and I believe the teacher will be Chris. So look forward to that. Yep, look forward to that. It's coming, and we'd like to see everybody here again. Again, I thank you for attending, and if you're already teaching the Peaceful Solution, remember your students, remember the care and concern and compassion that you need to put forth towards them, and also, even as a teacher, you're still a student of the Peaceful Solution too. So take all these things to heart, take the books off the shelf, and put them to use in your life, and don't let them gather any dust, okay? Look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.